watching PowerNation.
Today on Music City Trucks, our 93 W350 that we've christened as Project Nightshift is getting torn down and taken to the next level.
That's right, it's all about stance, style, and stopping power as we show you guys how to put a little bit more whoa in your go. All that and more happening today on Music City Trucks.
Nothing cooler than an old pickup, am I right?
Underneath all this dirt, there's probably a pretty good truck.
We've got our Ram W350, aka Project Nightshift, up on the lift for a little bit of an attitude adjustment. We're swapping out the entire suspension system for a brand new lift kit. But before any of that happens, we gotta roll these old axles out of our way. All right, Eric, give me a steady baseline.
We're gonna have to start making some plans here.
Plan C, I guess.
Plan C for Cummins?
It's Plan H. All right, with our old axles out of the way, we're ready to install our new leaf springs. I got Eric over there already installing the driver's side, while I'm gonna walk you guys through the passenger side. Now, for the most part, we are swapping out the entire system, but you guys don't have to get that crazy if you don't want to. One thing you can do is go ahead and swap out your factory risers for a set that is an inch or two taller. However, that can come with its own set of complications. For one, you're going to be stiffening up that rear axle, and the suspension travel is just not going to be there, so it's going to make for one heck of a bumpy ride. To prevent that from happening to us, one upgrade we're making is swapping out the factory leaf springs for this nice curvaceous set. That's going to do a couple things. One, it's going to drop that rear axle and raise the frame up to give us a nice aggressive stance, as well as a much smoother ride. First things first, we got to swap out these bushings. Now, pressing in a new set of leaf spring bushings is a fairly easy and straightforward process, but it's also one of those things that it's easy to do, but also easy to screw up. The main thing you don't want to do is accidentally cut the bushings or pre-crush your sleeves. And just like most things in life, lubrication is key. And all I'm using here is just a little bit of white lithium grease. That just kind of helps everything slide together. Then we'll go ahead and do our sleeve. All right, we got her started there, so we'll go ahead and seat it the rest of the way with our seat clamp. And if at any point you feel any extra resistance or something just doesn't feel right as you're pressing this in, just go ahead and back it off and double check and make sure everything's going in correctly. Not uncommon to sometimes have to start these with a rubber mallet. With our shackles in place, we're ready to stab in our leaf springs. This may take a little bit of mild persuasion. Now I'm using this C-clamp to kind of compress the leaf springs, and what that's going to do is bow them out so that it makes it easier to jam the front part of it up into the bolt hole.
All right, well, with those leaf springs finished up, it's time to get our new shocks installed. And these aren't just any old shocks, as you can see. There's a lot of benefits to remote reservoir shocks like these ones that came with our lift kit that we got from Summit Racing. The biggest benefit is having a higher fluid capacity due to the fact that there is a separate reservoir. And what that's gonna do for us is keep that fluid cooler, lead to a longer shock life, and less shock fade if we ever do end up off-road. And we wanna make sure that this truck is as dual purpose as possible, just in case we do feel like taking it off-road a little bit. We're just gonna leave it hand tight for right now. That way we've got some room to move around. Let's grab that axle. Looks a lot better after you gave it a bath.
Just FYI, there are a couple of leaks we'll need to fix a little later.
Ah, that's all right. We can take care of that after we get it back on the truck. Make sure these shocks stay out of the way. Keep going. Right there.
Okay.
All good?
That looks actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
Put the back bumper about right there. I dig it.
Oh yeah. Especially once we get the front done.
Don't be mean.
Oh yeah. Joel, you must have better knees than I do sitting down like there and there like that.
Oh no, they're just so shot that I lost all feeling in them permanently. Whew, it is a tight fit. If it's easy, everybody do it.
I don't come to work to get dirty. What is this? There we go. All right, come on, baby. Whew, a little. All right, we're gonna have to. I'm not doing this by hand. Don't try me. Get out of here. You know, that's really the biggest downside to using nylock nuts is you can't actually run stuff all the way down before you tighten it.
It's almost like they don't want you to do that.
Coming up, we shoot you straight on how to swap out your steering box. Go ahead and just turn it and count the revolutions as you get to the opposite side.
Well guys, I think it's safe to say we've done right by old Project Nightshift by giving it quite an attitude adjustment and slapping on that lift kit. Now that we've kind of addressed its stance, time to see what we can do about improving its drivability.
As far as drivability goes, an old workhorse like this is always gonna have a ton of room for improvement. And the first thing we're gonna be improving on is the steering. That's something that a lot of people don't really think about, but it can make a huge difference in your driving experience. The first upgrade we're gonna be making to our steering system is gonna be to replace our gearbox with one that has a higher ratio. The one that's in here from the factory has a ratio of 15:1, meaning that for every 15 degrees you turn your steering wheel, your front tires are gonna turn 1 degree. The one that we're installing has a 12.7:1 ratio, which means that the steering is gonna be a lot more responsive. But before we can install that, we gotta get this old one out of the way. Just because I know that there's probably gonna be some leakage out of here. Well, this is gonna be so much fun. At least this thing's not too heavy. Down you go. There we go. And the shaft. Whew. All right.
With our steering box out of the way, now's a good chance for us to go ahead and inspect our frame. Now over time, your steering box gets exposed to a lot of pressure, therefore can cause a few stress cracks here and there. You guys at home with Chevy C10s know exactly what I'm talking about. Initial inspection on our frame looks like we've got some minor surface rust, but it's still solid. There's a few scratches here as well, but from what I can tell, this thing's in great shape, so we're good to move on to the next step.
Now, our next step before we actually get this steering box installed is to make sure that it's centered. Now, wherever you get your steering boxes from, they can tell you all day long that they're centered when they show up, but you should always verify just to be sure. Now, centering a steering box is a pretty simple process. Now, I've got a mark here on the input shaft, or you can pick a fixed point on the steering shaft itself that you can monitor as you turn this box. Since this set screw is at the top, we're gonna use that as our point to watch for how many turns we're making. Now, what you're gonna do once it's maxed out to one side, go ahead and just turn it and count the revolutions as you get to the opposite side. 2 and 3. So we've got 3 turns from lock to lock inside of the steering box, which means that we need to go 1.5 turns to have it centered. We'll just give it 1.5. All right, now that we know our steering box is centered, we can go ahead and get our pitman arm put on. Now this part is pretty straightforward. I'm just gonna go ahead and give it a couple of taps to seat it a little bit. Very careful not to hit your threads. And just like with anything else like this, you want to make sure it goes on evenly. Now, we're not fully installing this quite yet. We're gonna come back and torque it after we get it installed in the truck. This is just to make sure that we don't have to worry about it falling off of here. And we're actually gonna remove our steering shaft, that way we're not fighting with it as we try and put the box itself back into the truck. Now, we're gonna pull the bracket off the old one, get it put on here, and get this thing bolted in. This is always the most fun part. Now that we've got our steering box installed, it's time to get the shaft installed. Now, we've already loosened up the set screws so we can get this slipped on, and you just want to make sure when you're slipping the U-joint on that your set screw ends up on the flat spot of the input shaft on the steering box. Joel went ahead and put some tape on the steering wheel so that I can see from out here where it sits center. That way we can make sure that everything is lined up. With that set screw in place, all we've got left up here is just to tighten up the lock nut there, and then we can move on to our sway bar. And why do I always get the tight spots?
Up next, we'll show you how to cross over to the other side and stabilize this 1-ton ride. Engine 3/16 on that side, we're good to go. When you're installing a lift kit on your rig, your selection of your sway bar is definitely going to be a factor, especially on how you're going to tie in to your steering linkage. One thing you can do is take a set of drop brackets and install them right onto your factory sway bar, and that's going to drop it down a couple of inches so that you can tie into your links. And then from there, you can take an adjustable drag link and tie into your steering knuckle and then into your pitman arm. What we're going to be installing is a crossover steering kit that we got from the guys at Offroad Design. And there are many benefits to going this route. For one, it significantly cuts down on the geometry needed to just simply steer the vehicle, especially in comparison to that push-pull technique that the factory used. However, going this route means that we do have to eliminate the factory sway bar, and there are kits out there that allow you to use a crossover style sway bar if you want to go that route, but since we're installing a set of steering stabilizers a little later on, it's just not going to be necessary. Let's get this thing out of here. All right, the next step is to bust the cap off of our knuckle so that we can install our new steering arm. Before you go to install your new steering arm, you want to make sure that both surfaces are perfectly clean. Now, since these are machined surfaces, Offroad Design recommends that you use a little bit of RTV on the outside edges. All right, with our RTV on, we're going to go ahead and install our studs. Now, each side of these studs have a long side and a short side. Short side goes down with some thread locker. Next step is to go ahead and drop in our kingpin spring. Now, since our factory one's still in good shape, we'll just go ahead and use the old one. I'm just going to tighten these nuts down in kind of a star pattern. That's going to evenly compress that spring all the way down to the bottom. All right, with our steering arm seated, we're good to torque these down to 110 pound-feet. The next piece of the puzzle is our center link, which we need to attach to the steering knuckle on the passenger side and then also over to the pitman arm on the driver's side. Now, before you cinch down your tie rod ends, you want to make sure you got about the equal amount of thread showing on each side. Looks like on this side we're sitting at about 1 3/16, 1 3/16 on that side, so we're good to go. For right now, this center link is by no stretch set in stone. We're just trying to get it set as straight as possible so we can test the throw of our steering wheel. We will definitely have to come back and do an alignment later. All right, that should work for right there. We're gonna wait to put our cotter pins in, just in case we need to make a few more adjustments, but ready for our first test run on our steering linkage. All right, our steering wheel is centered. Front hubs are straight. Let's check our revolutions. 1, 1.5, 1, 2, 3. All right, 1.5, back to straight. Cool, good to go. The last thing we're gonna be installing is a set of steering stabilizers on our front axle here. Now, any of you guys at home that have ever driven a big heavy truck like this know that going across a set of railroad tracks or even a speed bump, it could be really jarring. Now, what a steering stabilizer is designed to do is to absorb a lot of that impact using these little compression springs. And putting one of these kits in is really easy, and it can really make a difference on your driving experience. All right, we'll keep our mounting bracket a little bit loose for right now, just till we get everything finalized. Each of these shock mounts have a little rubber bushing that just slides over a little sleeve. Goes out nice and easy just like that, with a little bit of petroleum jelly. Now, these little bushings usually do pop right into place, but every once in a while you gotta use a hydraulic press or even a vise. All right, the next thing we're gonna measure is our compression of our shocks. This kit recommends that we go 4.5 inches. Like we're good on that side. Need to go out just a little bit on this side. Yep, that'll do it.
Coming up, we break down how you can break up with your old dually drums. You can definitely smell that this hasn't been serviced in a while.
All right, big guy, I got the front end all buttoned up. Ooh, looks like we got some fancy new toys.
We've basically built a little freight train between the lift kit and all the extra power we're squeezing out of that engine. So the next logical step is to make sure we can actually stop this.
Yeah, I'll tackle the passenger side if you want to get the driver.
Yeah, that works.
Swapping out your drum brakes for a set of discs is a really popular subject. Not even just amongst truck guys, but auto enthusiasts in general. And when you consider all the benefits of increased stopping power, serviceability, you can kind of see why.
That's right. If you've ever had to deal with drum brakes before, especially an older set of drum brakes that hasn't been touched in a while, you know how much of a pain you know how much of a pain they can be dealing with all the springs and stuff. Disc brakes eliminate all of that. Turn what could take hours into something that takes minutes.
You need a really, 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 really big socket.
We're gonna end up burning through all these shop towels while we do this.
Take them out of your check.
You definitely smell that this hasn't been serviced in a while. I'm here for you, Joel.
Right.
You know, I guess I probably could have left the actual brake on there, huh, since we're pulling the whole thing.
The next step in our rear disc brake conversion is to put together our hub and rotor assembly. Now the guys at EGR specifically designed this thing so that you can use the factory style hub. But the next step we have to do is actually put this wheel spacer on, and it just mounts right over to the hub assembly, and then you just put in your brand new wheel studs. Now I like to put on just a little bit of NICs just so they slide in a little bit easier. Now most of the time you do have to use a hydraulic press to put these in, but in all honesty, if you got a brass pin and a hammer, they'll go in just like that as well. And it'll probably take you several rounds of doing this, but once you've got that nice solid metal on metal contact, as well as even threads on all your lug studs, and your wheel spacer doesn't have any play in it, we're good to put this on the rotor. Now on the back side of your rotor, you've got your 8 studs sticking up from your wheel spacers, and with the kit, it also included new flat washers and new nylon nuts. We'll go ahead and put all these down, cinch them up, and then they'll get torqued in a star pattern to 100 pound-feet.
Well, now we're ready to start getting our caliper brackets installed, starting with this adapter plate that's gonna bolt in place of the backing plate from our old drum brakes. Now we're gonna start with some of this nice new hardware that came with the kit. Get these T-bolts put in. Now that we've got that adapter plate on there, we're ready to put the actual caliper bracket on. Now this particular kit came with 4 spacers. Depending on which calipers you're using, you may need more or less spacers. But that's really gonna come down to what you're using. The actual caliper bracket goes on the back side of all these spacers. Now that we've got all that snugged up, we're gonna go ahead and torque that down, and then we're ready for our hub assemblies.
Now we couldn't go through all that work of completely refurbishing our entire rear brake assembly without also addressing the fronts. When the guys at PowerStop found out that we were building this big old colossus of a Cummins, well, they were eager to jump on the project, and they sent us a brand new set of their Z36 carbon fiber ceramic coated pads, as well as a brand spanking new rotor.
Even though these rotors are OE replacements, they are an upgrade. They're made from more durable steel, so they're gonna last much longer. Plus, you can use your factory style wheel bearings and seals.
All right, with our bearings and the lock in place, we're ready to move on to our pads. Now, PowerStop recommends that you use a little bit of their grease on the back side of your pads to kind of cut down on any friction. Now, I know it seems a little counterintuitive to put some grease on your brake pads, but this is actually going to cut down on noise and road vibrations, and at the end of the day, your pads actually have a little bit of play in them, so this is going to allow for a little bit more free movement. Now, on these old Rams, they've got a little bit of a shoulder on the bottom and top side of the spindle, and that allows your backside pad to sit in there nice and evenly up on your rotor. Next up is our caliper and our other pad. Now we got our caliper in place, and these have a little bit of a locking tab that sit between the spindle and the backside of the caliper. They're kind of tricky to get in there, but if you lift up backside of your caliper, kind of just slide it in there. And anytime you're doing your brakes, whether it's the calipers, the pads, the rotors, doesn't matter, always inspect your brake lines. Ours turned out to be a little dry rotted, so we decided to go ahead and swap them out. All right, all we gotta do now is get the other side on, bleed the system, install our lockers, good to go. Well, buddy, it's been a busy couple of days, but we got a lot of stuff done.
Yeah, lift kit, got the steering stabilizers all taken care of, brakes all the way around. I mean, it's shaping up to be a pretty nice truck.
Yep, she's gonna be me. Better get ourselves cleaned up though. Don't want any grease on us for what's coming next.
Is that cold 1 o'clock?
Not exactly, but you are about to get really familiar with the sanding block.
Oh boy.
And body filler. And primer.